A man sits on a motorcycle at the bottom of a hill so steep that people standing halfway up have to lean into it to keep their footing. The machine under him is wrong. The frame has been stretched until it looks like somebody grabbed both ends and pulled. The rear tire is wrapped in chain. There is no front brake, no rear brake worth the name, no lights, no seat to speak of. He is not going to ride up that hill. He is going to throw the motorcycle at it and try to stay attached. This was one of the biggest spectator sports in American motorcycling, and almost nobody talks about it now. Here's the part that ought to bother you. If you know anything about American motorcycle history, you know about board track racing, the wooden ovals, the riders killed, the crowds killed, the newspapers calling them murderdromes. We remember board tracks because they were lethal to the audience. Hill climbing was every bit as big, ran far longer, and put on a better show. And it faded out of the story almost entirely. Not because it was worse, because nobody in the crowd died, so nobody wrote about it afterwards. Let me show you what was actually happening on those hills, because the engineering is stranger than the reputation. Start with the machine, because the machine explains everything. Look at a hill climb motorcycle from the 1930s, and the first thing you notice is the length. The frame is enormously long. A road bike of the same period looks stubby beside it. That is not fashion. That is a fight with physics. On a slope that steep, the whole weight of the machine and rider hangs behind the rear wheel. Open the throttle, and the front end wants to come up and keep coming up. And once it passes vertical, the whole thing loops over backwards on top of the man riding it. Stretching the frame moves the mass forward and gives the front wheel a longer lever to hold itself down. That is the entire reason. Every one of those absurd extended frames exists to stop the machine from throwing itself over. Now the second problem, and this one is harder, power is easy. Traction is not. You can build an engine that makes enough to climb anything. What you cannot do is persuade a rubber tire to grip loose dirt at a 40-degree angle while a large twin is trying to tear it loose. So the riders stopped asking rubber to do it. The first hill climbers, in the early 1920s, were ordinary road bikes stripped of everything unnecessary, with lengths of chain wrapped around the rear wheel. Plain chain, wound around the tire and fastened. The links bite into the dirt where rubber only polishes it. Then it escalated, the way these things do. Men began welding paddles to the chains, then welding paddles directly to the rim, and running the tire stripped or gone entirely. Then studs. Then studs and paddles together on hoops that had stopped being tires in any recognizable sense. Think about what that means for the machine underneath. Every one of those bites is a hammer blow into the drivetrain. Chains snapped, belts stripped, engines let go. A serious hill climb machine was not something you rode home. It was something you rebuilt between meetings. And they ran on alcohol, not petrol, for the compression and the cooling it allowed. That is not a detail you add for flavor. It tells you the state of mind. Nobody feeds a motorcycle alcohol and welds spikes to its wheel unless the run is worth more than the machine. Which it was, because by the middle of the 1920s, this thing had gone national. Nearly every state had a hill worth climbing, and a club that owned it. The sport grew enormously through those years, and it grew from the ground up, out of local clubs with a slope and a stopwatch. In California, the riders had a name for themselves. They were slant artists. I like that phrase a great deal. It is not a name a promoter invents. It is what men call themselves when they are good at something that has no obvious use. So what were they good at, exactly? Because from the bottom of the hill, it looks like nothing more complicated than opening the throttle. Time a run. The whole thing is over in seconds, and the hill is decided in the first two of them. Off the line, the rider has to put everything into the ground at once and hold the front wheel down while he does it. Body flat forward over the tank, weight as far up the machine as he can get it, feet already off the pegs and trailing. Too little and the paddles spin and dig and he is sitting still in a hole of his own making. Too much and the front comes up, and once it is up, there is nothing he can do about it. There is no correcting it later. On a hill, there is no later. And the slope is never the same twice. Every machine that goes up takes some of it away. So the man running 20th is climbing something quite different from the man who ran first. Watching a rider read a rut that did not exist an hour ago and put his power down on the one strip of dirt still whole. That is the skill. That is what a slant artist actually was. And then the factories arrived, and it stopped being amateur. By 1928, both Indian and Excelsior had developed proper factory hill climbers in the two classes that mattered, 45 cubic inch and 61 cubic inch, not modified road machines. Purpose-built specials with the long frames, the alcohol engines, all of it. Here is the bit that surprises people who assume American motorcycling was always a two-horse race between Indian and Harley-Davidson. Excelsior and Indian took the National Hill Climb Championship in 1929, and again in 1930, and again in 1931. 3 years running, Harley-Davidson lost the biggest spectator title in American motorcycling. That mattered commercially in a way that is easy to underestimate now. This was a period when what won on Sunday was expected to sell on Monday, and hill climbs were where the public actually stood close enough to see, not a distant oval. A hill, with the crowd on both sides of it, near enough to be showered in dirt. Harley-Davidson's answer was to stop competing with a modified engine and build a proper one. An overhead valve factory climber, the machine known as the DAH. From 1932, they took the championship back. Except the story does not tidy itself up the way that sentence suggests, because of what had just happened to the company that beat them. Excelsior was not some small outfit that got lucky on a hill. By 1928, it stood third in the American motorcycle market, behind Indian and Harley-Davidson, and it had just taken the biggest spectator title in the country off both of them. In September of 1931, the owner, Ignaz Schwinn, called his management into a room and told them, with no warning of any kind, that they were finished. Today we quit. He had looked at the Depression, concluded it could run another 8 years and get worse, and decided he was not going to spend the bicycle company keeping the motorcycle company alive. That was the whole process. No slow decline, no receivership, no final model, no announcement to dealers first. The third largest motorcycle manufacturer in America, holding hill climb titles, simply stopped. So when Harley-Davidson took the championship back in 1932, one of the two marcas that had taken it from them was not beaten. It had already gone. The names on those machines are worth knowing, because two of them run through the whole story. Joe Petrali rode for Harley-Davidson, and he is one of the strongest arguments in American racing for the all-rounder. He won on dirt, he won on boards, he won on hills, and he later set a speed record on the sand at Daytona. If you had to name the most complete American motorcycle racer of the period, most people who know the era name him. Windy Lindstrom and Herb Reber rode alongside him. But the man I keep coming back to rode for Indian, and his name is Orie Steele. Steele was a national hill climb champion through the 1920s and into the 30s. And by the time Petrali arrived in the sport, Steele was already at the back end of his career. He beat him anyway. Several times, in the late 1920s, in matchups people who saw them still talked about decades later. And here is the detail that settles it, because it does not come from Steele or anyone selling Indians. Petrali, who beat almost everybody at almost everything, was asked later in life who the best of his hill climbing rivals had been. He named Orie Steele. When the man who won everything picks out the one who kept beating him, that is worth more than any record book. And it is the kind of thing that gets lost when a sport falls out of the story. If you are enjoying this, subscribing genuinely helps more than it looks like it does. Now, the crowds, because this is where the scale becomes clear, and where I have to be careful with numbers. You will find enormous figures attached to hill climbing, and some of them belong to a different sport. The car hill climbs, which drew crowds of their own, and should not be borrowed to inflate this one. So take one hill and follow it honestly. Mount Garfield in Michigan. The first climb there was held in 1921, and it drew about 50 spectators. 50. A club event on a sand hill. At its peak, in the middle 1960s, the annual professional climb at that same hill drew upward of 15,000. From 50 people to 15,000 on one hill on one weekend of the year. Multiply that across every state with a slope and a motorcycle club, and you have the size of it without inventing a single number. Which brings us to the question the whole thing turns on. If it was that big, where did it go? The war took the first bite. Motorsport went on the shelf, factories built other things, and the men who rode were somewhere else. That happened to everything, and everything came back. But hill climbing came back smaller. The sport revived, and revived properly in the 1960s and again in the 70s when American motorcycle culture was changing fast. But the pull it had before the war never fully returned. I think there are two honest reasons, and neither is that the sport got worse. The first is that hill climbing does not televise. A climb lasts a handful of seconds. There is no strategy to follow, no positions changing, no order to a field. There is a man, a hill, and either he gets up it or he does not. That is magnificent to stand next to, and almost nothing on a screen. The sports that grew after the war were the ones a camera could carry. The second is that it never produced a disaster. That sounds like a strange thing to hold against a sport, but look at how motorcycle history actually gets written. Board track racing is remembered in detail. The machines, the speeds, the names. Largely because of Newark in 1912 and the fires and the dead spectators. Catastrophe generates newspapers, and newspapers generate the record that historians work from a century later. Hill climbing broke a great many collarbones and destroyed an enormous amount of machinery, and did not, by and large, kill the people watching. So it left thin paperwork. And thin paperwork is how a sport that filled hillsides for 40 years ends up as a footnote to the era that killed its audience. There is one more thing, and it is the reason I wanted to make this at all. Motorcycle hill climbing never actually stopped. The clubs that owned those hills mostly still own them. Muskegon still runs. The professional class still exists. And the modern machines have gone somewhere the 1930s would recognize instantly. Longer, stranger, with more of everything at the back, and the same problem to solve at the front. Go and watch one now, and you will see a man on a machine with a stretched frame and a paddled rear wheel, feeding the throttle into a slope that should not be climbable, doing exactly what Orie Steele was doing before the war, because the hill has not changed. That is the thing about it. You can add 100 horsepower, and the hill takes none of it. Grip is not something you can buy. It is negotiated, a few square inches at a time, between something spinning and something loose, and it is settled in the first 2 seconds off the line. Every other kind of racing has been transformed by money and aerodynamics and electronics. This one is still a man, a slope, and the oldest question in motorcycling. Can you put it down?